There are moments in life when the air itself seems to vibrate with a strange stillness, when the familiar patterns of thought and routine suddenly appear fragile, like a thin veil stretched over something immense and unspeakable. It is in these moments that we feel the whisper of something ancient stirring at the edge of our perception, calling us to awaken from a sleep so deep we had mistaken it for life itself. This whisper is not loud, but it carries the weight of eternity, and once it is heard, it cannot be unheard. It is the quiet beginning of what many call a spiritual awakening, and it arrives not as a gentle suggestion, but as a warning. The reality you thought you knew has always been a carefully woven illusion, and behind its shimmering threads lies a secret. You were never supposed to discover. To describe this secret is to attempt to give shape to a shadow, to name what resists language. Yet, even without precise words, one feels it pressing at the edges of consciousness, like a dream half-remembered but utterly real. This sense of an undisclosed truth has haunted humanity for millennia. Prophets hinted at it in parables, mystics cloaked it in symbols, and sages buried it within poems so layered that only the patient could find the seed of wisdom at their core. Even modern science, with its rigorous instruments and empirical frameworks, begins to circle the same horizon. That reality may not be what it appears to be. That consciousness itself is not merely a byproduct of matter, but perhaps the very architect behind the stage on which matter performs. Why, then, is it a warning? Because to awaken is to dismantle the scaffolding of certainty. It is to discover that what you thought was solid ground may in fact be shifting sand. The world you navigate daily, your job, your relationships, the roles you wear like clothing may suddenly appear not as absolute truths but as provisional masks. The warning is not of danger in the conventional sense, but of transformation. It tells you that once you glimpse behind the curtain, you cannot simply return to your old ways of seeing. Illusion once pierced. For years, you've watched the performance on stage, absorbed by the actors, moved by their stories, convinced that this drama is the totality of reality. Then, one day, you stumble backstage and why were you seated in the audience to begin with? The moment of awakening is akin to this realization. Except the theater is existence itself, and the revelation is that you are not merely an audience member, but a participant, a co-creator, even a fragment of the very intelligence that authored the play. But the secret you were never supposed to know is far more unsettling than the discovery of stagecraft. It suggests that the boundaries between self and world, mind and matter, even life and death, are constructs of perception rather than inviolable laws. It whispers that time may not be a straight line but a spiral, that the you reading these words may not be singular, but one of countless reflections across a field of infinite possibility. It hints that what you call reality is a consensus dream, reinforced by belief and sustained by the energy of attention. To awaken spiritually, then, is to break the spell, to reclaim your attention from the hypnotic rhythm of repetition and see that the dream has always been negotiable. This is not the kind of truth one can stumble upon casually, for it carries consequences. When you begin to see the dream, the mechanisms of control that govern society, fear, desire, distraction lose much of their power over you. Yet at the same time, you may feel the weight of responsibility settle on your shoulders. For you realize that freedom is not simply release, but creation. To awaken is to inherit the burden of choice, to recognize that every thought, every action, every intention participates in weaving the fabric of the real. And here lies the paradox. Awakening reveals both your infinite insignificance and your infinite importance. You are a single breath in the cosmos, yet the cosmos breathes itself through you. The warning comes because most are not prepared to hold this paradox. We have been conditioned to crave certainty, to cling to fixed definitions of self, purpose, and reality. To surrender these definitions feels like death, and in a sense, it is the death of illusion, the death of a smaller identity that served as both comfort and cage. Many who glimpse the greater reality retreat, preferring the safety of familiar ignorance. Others cling to fragments of the secret and distort it into systems of control or dogma. But those who walk steadily into the unknown, with open eyes, find that the death of the false self is also the birth of something luminous, something that no language can confine, yet every soul longs to touch. In this unfolding exploration, we will journey into the hidden corridors of consciousness, tracing the outlines of the secret that was never meant to be spoken. We will wander through the metaphysical architecture of awakening, examining the illusions that sustain the dream and the truths that dissolve it. We will descend into symbolic stories where myth and metaphor reveal more than literal explanation ever could. And finally, we will ask how such revelations might be lived, not as abstract philosophy, but as a new way of inhabiting the world with clarity, compassion, and power. But for now, let us remain at the threshold of this journey. The introduction has opened the curtain only a little, enough to let a sliver of light pour in. The path ahead is not about absorbing information, but about remembering what has always been present. The secret is not far away, hidden in some distant scripture or guarded vault. It has been whispering through your own heartbeat, shining through your breath, echoing in your quietest thoughts. The only question is whether you are ready to hear it fully. Without turning away, to begin unfolding the heart of this exploration, we must step carefully into the space where language strains against its own limits. Spiritual awakening is not merely the acquisition of new beliefs or the exchange of one ideology for another. It is the breaking of a spell, a collapse of veils, a radical unveiling that leaves nothing untouched. And yet, when we attempt to speak of it, we are forced to use the very tools of the illusion: words, concepts, ideas that belong to the dream itself. Thus, everything said here must be taken as a finger pointing toward the moon rather than the moon itself, a map that hints at its core, the warning attached to. Spiritual awakening is not meant to frighten, but to prepare. When the veil begins to dissolve, what emerges is not always the blissful serenity promised in polished teachings and packaged courses. Awakening is often violent in its simplicity, a shock to the system that destabilizes old certainties. What once felt permanent, the structures of time, the solidity of matter, even the narrative of personal identity, suddenly reveal themselves as provisional. The great theme here, that reality is layered, and what most of us inhabit is but one thin slice of an unimaginably vast continuum. The danger lies not in the truth itself, but in our resistance to it, in the mind's desperate attempt to cling to a crumbling illusion. One of the central concepts in this secret is the distinction between perception and reality. From birth, we are trained to mistake the map for the territory, to assume that what we perceive through the senses is the totality of what is. Yet perception is a filter, a narrowing of infinite possibilities into something manageable for survival. It is as though the human mind is a lens, tuned to highlight certain frequencies while discarding others. In awakening, that lens begins to widen, and we suddenly realize that the world we thought was reality is more like a hologram, a projection shaped by consciousness itself. This recognition is both liberating and destabilizing. The next theme is that of illusion and truth, the eternal dance between what appears and what is. Illusion is not inherently malicious. It is the necessary fabric that allows us to play the game of life, to act within time, to learn through contrast. Yet illusion becomes a prison when we forget it is a veil. When we cling so tightly to a pin, another pillar bit of wisdom that has traveled across centuries and civil coincide of the allegory of the cave, told by Plato thousands of years ago. In that shadowed cavern, prisoners are chained so that they see only where the true source of life and meaning is revealed. Yet the warning is clear. Returning to the cave, Trying to explain to others that what they see is illusion often leads not to acceptance but to hostility. This story resonates today as much as it did in ancient Athens. It is not just philosophy. It is a map of the perilous journey of awakening, where the light of truth is both. Liberating Goneth, the symbolic narrative that whispers through time, is the myth of the phoenix, born from fire, consumed by flame, and reborn from its own ashes. The phoenix embodies the cycle of death and renewal that defines the spiritual path. Awakening is rarely a gentle blooming. More often it is a fiery destruction of what no longer serves, the incineration of old identities, beliefs, and attachments. The self you thought was permanent is reduced to ash, and from that ash rises a self more luminous, more enduring. The phoenix is not merely a myth, but a mirror held to the soul, warning that the process of awakening demands a willingness to burn. So there is also another story comes through in mystical tradition, perhaps the recoup to immerse ones and great challenge of any awakening is not simply the vision itself, but the return. It is one thing to glimpse behind the curtain of reality, to feel the ground dissolve beneath you as truth bursts through like lightning. It is quite another to carry that vision into the ordinary rhythm of days and years. Too often, awakening is imagined as a permanent state of bliss, a doorway into eternal serenity that requires no further effort. But in truth, awakening is the beginning of a deeper responsibility, the invitation to integrate the infinite into the finite, the cosmic into the mundane. Without this integration, the awakening experience risks becoming little more than a beautiful memory, the shimmering echo that fades in the harsh light. First implication lies in how we relate to ourselves. Once you recognize that the self you defend so fiercely is a mask, an illusion stitched from memory and habit, how do you live within that mask without being trapped by it? The paradox of awakening is that you still must play the role. The awakened mother still feeds her child. The awakened worker still attends meetings. The awakened friend still listens to stories of sorrow and joy. Yet beneath these roles lies the constant awareness that they are not ultimate, that the true self is not the mask but the actor behind it, and even deeper, the stage upon which the play unfolds. This realization does not strip life of meaning but infuses it with a lighter touch. You begin to act without clinging, to engage without being consumed, to live with sincerity yet without the desperate weight of identification. Relationships, too, are transformed. In the sleep of illusion, others appear as separate entities, each locked within their own fortress of identity, each a source of desire or threat, comfort or discomfort. Awakening dissolves this separation, revealing that every income work, too, takes a health and the body are also reframed. Awakening elves that associate the fin to integrate. Awakening is to live with eyes open, heart exposed, and spirit unarmored. It is not to escape the world, but to inhabit it more fully, to walk among its illusions with the knowledge that they are both empty and luminous, both false and holy. And it is to accept the responsibility that comes with such vision, the responsibility to embody truth in action, to radiate presence in a world that longs for it, to be a reminder of what every soul already knows but has forgotten. And so we arrive at the edge of words, where explanation falters and silence speaks louder. The story of awakening is not something that can be finished, for it is not a story with an ending. It is an ongoing unfolding, a spiral that circles deeper with every breath. What you have heard so far are only signposts, pointing toward a landscape that cannot be mapped. The real journey begins not in these words, but in the pause that follows them, in the choice you make once the page is turned. The truth is this: spiritual awakening is not a possession, not a prize to be grasped, not an achievement to be displayed. It is a remembering. It is the return to what was never lost, the uncovering of what has always been here, waiting behind the noise and the masks and the rushing of time. You have not been asked to become someone new. You have been invited to stop pretending you are someone you rare. Forbidden knowledge, you have glimpsed that reality is not as it seems, that you are not who you thought you were, that the world is both illusion and revelation demands something of you. It demands courage. Courage to walk differently in a world that clings to sleep. Courage to act with love when it is easier to act with fear. Courage to release the armor of identity. This courage is not dramatic. It is not the roar of a warrior, but the quiet persistence of a soul that refuses to forget. It shows itself in the smallest moments. When you pause before reacting in anger. When you listen without judgment. When you feel the pulse of life in your own breath and recognize it as the same pulse that moves the stars. It is in these moments that the veil thins, that the ordinary cracks open to reveal the extraordinary that has been shimmering beneath all along. Do not wait for the perfect moment. Do not imagine that awakening lies in some distant temple, some future lifetime, some teacher who has yet to arrive. The doorway is here, now. In this very instant, close your eyes and notice the silence between thoughts, the presence behind awareness, the vastness that holds even your sense of self. That is the secret. That is the homecoming. And so the call is simple. Wake up. Not tomorrow. Not in theory. Not only in meditation, but in the raw immediacy of life. Wake up when you drink water, when you speak to a stranger, when you feel sorrow, when you laugh. Wake up in your work, in your play, in your solitude, in your love. Wake up to the fact that the divine is not hiding. It is written into every detail of existence, including you. The world does not need more theories or more noise. It needs the radiance of the awakened heart, steady and clear, alive and present. It needs you, not as the mask you were taught to wear, but as the truth you have always been. And so let these words dissolve. Let them fall away. Like scaffolding after a structure is complete. What remains is not my voice, but your silence. Not my call, but your awakening. Step into it now. You are ready.